Hello and welcome to the 5 Yard Rush Daily Fantasy Sports Show. I'm Mark Ferguson, joined as ever by my compadre Nick of Wigan. Nick, how are you doing tonight?
I didn't know you could speak Spanish, Mark.
Oh, muchos fluent.
No, I'm all good. I'm all good. Yeah, thank you.
Great. So we're going to be talking all things NFL on FanTeam tonight. It's the same old menu as usual. We've got a starter of season-long talk, an amuse-bouche of Thursday night football showdown action, and then a main course about the red zone on FanTeam. No dessert as I'm on a diet. So yeah, week 14 already, Nick. Only 5 weeks of the regular season to go.
Yeah, we got to that point again, haven't we? Where the season's it feels like it started last week and it's almost over with. Or well, we've got the playoffs, haven't we, to look forward to? But it's everything from Thanksgiving onwards feels a little bit bittersweet, I think, in the NFL season because it's almost coming to an end, and teams that aren't going to make the playoffs, you're not watching football as of next month. So.
Yeah, and we're also at that time where injuries are just decimating our teams, and it's making it harder and harder to make decisions on a Thursday for a Sunday.
It's even worse in the era of COVID. Like this just hasn't helped at all, has it? You can deal with the physical injuries, you can make a call on that, but when you've got some nice matchups and there's COVID designations being thrown around left, right, and centre, and people, some of it's not even obvious. Like people coming into close contact, and there's no actual confirmation as to whether they're positive or not, but they're still designated COVID. So it is not ideal, but we have to adapt, Mark, don't we? This is the ever changing world we live in.
I was looking at the sort of matchups, and I was like, well, that's a great team to run against, but I can't play that team because too many injuries in that backfield, too much of a share. Same with the receivers. No, well, they've lost their one, they've lost their two, so who am I going to play from there? So I feel like your player pool's getting smaller and smaller every week at the moment.
Yeah. And it feels like that in all the sports I'm playing in DFS at the moment, because the NBA slate is basically like you're picking a who's who of bench players at the moment in that. It just seems that in sport in general, COVID and injuries are rife at the moment.
Yeah, and with all of the Premier League rumours about COVID, who knows what's going to happen to this weekend, slate for that as well. So yeah, lots of uncertainty. As if there isn't enough uncertainty in our lives already, we can't even rely on these injury reports anymore.
I know, but for immunity, then everyone who's had COVID or designated COVID, just get yourself down to a number 10 party down at Downing Street where everyone seems to be immune and no one needs to follow rules anymore. Maybe that's where we need to start playing the games.
Yeah. We're doing politics, are we now? You couldn't help yourself, could you?
That is all you'll hear from me as of now. I will not speak anymore because it's probably not PC enough or PG enough for this pod, Mark.
We couldn't have had Jack on this week if you were going to talk about politics and stuff.
No, we couldn't.
So before we do anything else, I'll just quickly let you know about the contest available on FanTeam this weekend. There's the usual Sunday Redzone, which is all 11 games from the 6 and 9 p.m. kickoffs. That's got the usual €2 and €12 buy-ins with €7,500 and €2,500 prize pools. I think last week I was doing pretty well for a long time, and feels like happens to me every other week. Come the 9 o'clock games, about the third quarter, my teams just fall off a cliff, and it seems like it's like I think at the moment I'm almost making it happen because I'm expecting it to happen. I'm manifesting it at the moment, I think, as the youngsters would say. So let's talk about something a little bit more positive for me, season long, because I'm actually doing okay. And that, Nick, Are you ready to show us your pod team for this week?
I wish
Do you want to show us your pod
wish I
team for
didn't
this
have to
week?
show the pod team this week. So let's have a look at the tail of the tape then. So this was the past week for me. Not a bad week across the board, I don't think, point scoring wise, but greatly helped by that strong core of Jefferson, Cousins, Taylor, Pittman. Harris had a decent enough game as well, but I didn't make up any ground whatsoever with that performance. In fact, I don't know if I've maybe even lost ground with this pod team yet again last week. I think I did take a slight hit, so I don't think that's helped me, but I'm mingling around 653 with my pod team. My highest team's at 374, and I've got a couple of teams mingling around the 400s that still have a chance, but this pod team's down at 650, and I'm running out of weeks to turn it round now. And because of the injuries that are cropping up, I think a lot of players I will want now moving forward are probably going to be fairly highly owned. So either I go at it from a perspective of try and target the people that aren't as highly owned, which a couple of the guys I've brought in this week, I've tried to make it so it is that way. But yeah, not a bad week mark there, but the issues glaringly are I've got a few on bye this week. So Jasicki, which I knew that was coming, but he was a transfer I didn't want to make up until this week, really. Pittman is another, and Jonathan Taylor. It's concerning me that Mixon isn't really practicing either, but I'm just gonna roll with him, I think, and hope that he suits up at the weekend. So the changes that I've had to make this week are understandably because of the buys yet again coming in, and no matter how much planning I've tried to do for these buys, I feel like they've still come quite thick and fast for certain players. The Taylor and Pittman one has just crept up on me from absolutely nowhere. Was aware of it, but it's I feel like I opened my teams earlier and it was just like a sea of red. So what I've tried to do this week, I have brought in Fournette. Not a bad run to end the season, I don't think, Fournette, and he has been really involved as of late in Tampa Bay's offense. I really like the usage. He starts off with a tough game this week against Buffalo, but I do think Buffalo are a team that you can actually run on. And then he's got a really good run to finish the season with the Saints, the Panthers, the Jets, and the Panthers again. Deontay Johnson is just getting too many targets, and it's such a high percentage target share of the passing there in Pittsburgh. He's getting the volume is crazy. So I'm not going to ignore him any longer at 17, especially whilst the Steelers are still chasing. And then Kittle is the other one now. Since probably not week one, because I brought Hawkinson in regrettably, but probably since about week 4 or week 5, I've not really spent up at the tight end position in this team. I've had a mixture of Dalton Schultz. I think I might have had Dawson Knox for a week or two. I think I've even been as low down as Uzoma at points, but Kittle comes in this week at 15 and a half. Again, low owned as things stand. Started the season off a bit slow, I think, but in recent weeks, since coming back from his injuries, he's looked more like the Kittle that fantasy owners seem to love. And I think because the Niners are still a little bit banged up in certain areas of their offense, like there's no set running back there. We know it's a running back by committee anyway, but I think because they're having these little niggly injuries, Deebo Samuel for the second week seems to have popped up on the injury list as well. I mean, Kittle's a massive part of that offense anyway, but he just seems to be uncovered at times in the game, and you think that's George Kittle. Someone should probably be on him, but linebackers can't really match up against him. He's a big physical tight end, and he contributes massively in the receiving game for San Francisco as well. So I'm not going to ignore him any longer, Mark. I do think he is a good addition. He's probably one of the more consistent tight ends in recent weeks when you look at his scores and his usage. So even though I don't like spending up at that position, given that he is low owned and given that San Francisco are pushing for that wild card spot, I'm more than happy to bring him in. And I do think Jimmy, as much as I'm not a massive Jimmy Garoppolo lover at quarterback, I think he does have a bit of a connection with Kittle.
Yeah, I like him. I like that play. I think he's one of the few tight ends that has that big ceiling game in them. And is he, what's that, 4% owned, is he?
Yeah, 4% as it stands now. That will be based on last week, I'm sure. So it's more than likely that that will increase, I've no doubt, this week. But given that a lot of people have got similar issues where there's got to be transfers of people like Taylor, and I'm sure Pittman will have been highly owned going into this week as well with his buy. So it might be an area where people look away from as an area of need. So it could be, I mean, he had nigh on 40 points against the Seahawks last week, which for a tight end is absolutely incredible. Some tight ends on the list we've spoken about won't score that in a season. So yeah, he's got that high ceiling, like you said, and I'm hoping that not many jump ship to Kittle this week, and hopefully it'll just give me a little bit of a leg up and try and chase the pack again.
Yeah, and Deontay Johnson has just been so consistent, hasn't he? Again, he seems under-owned to me as well. I think he's there's only three receivers who get over 30% target shares facing both man and zone coverage. The top two are Cooper Kupp and Devontae Adams, and the third one is Deontay Johnson. Yeah. So he's pretty much matchup proof at the moment. It's all about health, basically him staying healthy and stuff. So I really like him. Fournette's been on fire. I mean, just in the receiving game, it's been like, was it eight targets or 8 receptions, and 6 receptions the last 3 games, I think, something like that.
And we'll talk about him more, I'm sure, when it comes to the red zone contest. But his targets that he's getting, you can't ignore them. Cannot ignore them.
No, so I think I think those are a good choice. I think bringing 2 4% players in will help you, assuming they do well, help you sort of catch up and make up some ground. So
I'm hoping so, Mark, because I've not got much time left to make that ground up. So even just to jump into the 500s, if I can manage that this week, which isn't a massive amount of points in difference. So I'm looking at one of my teams now that's around 450, and it's only really a difference of about 60 points between this team and that team. So it's not a huge gap to make up, given that on a good week you can score a massive amount of points in this season long. There can be some weeks where you're scoring 70, 80 points. There can be some weeks where you're scoring 160, 170 points. And ideally, it's those weeks that I need now to close the season out to get anywhere close to in the cash spaces. But this is a team that we talk about every week because we've spoke about our teams throughout the season. We've covered the same team. If I was talking passionately about one of my teams, it would be the one that is leading the pack, which is in the 300s. That's the one that has the chance of cashing. But for consistency, I'll still talk about this team because it does still have a slim chance of getting to the cash spaces, and there will be people like me that are in this position as well.
No, I think there's still 5 weeks to go, and if you made up 60 points a week, say, that's 300 points you're going to make up. So, I think it's definitely doable. I also think people, as I always mention this, I think as the season goes long, some people's interest will tail off. Yeah. I just think by just being interested, I think, especially with the buys this week, were a lot of popular players, so.
Yeah, fatigue starts kicking in with stuff like this, doesn't it, at this stage in the season? I'm feeling it myself, and we love the sport. And we love talking about it, but you do feel it. You're looking at the same names every week, trying to guess the same answers to the same equations. So the fatigue definitely does kick in.
Yeah. So my pod team moved up from 479 to 400 this week. The funny enough, so I've got 4 teams in this season long, and I had this beautiful spreadsheet with all my bye weeks, etc. And for some reason, I did a very good job with this team, the pod team, my team, which is currently my second highest team, which is about 220th, 240th, something. I've managed to end up with 4 transfers to do this week. I've got no idea how I've mucked that up. Thankfully, my team in the top 100 wasn't an issue. But for the pod team, I always forget to do the last week's scores, but I made up 79 points.
Nice.
You know, helped by players like Jefferson and Gronk there. But going forwards for this week, I had Jonathan Taylor in there. Obviously, I had to take him out, and I've put in Alvin Kamara. I think we'll probably be talking about this in more detail for the weekly one as well, why I think he's such a good pick there. And I had to change defense because that was New England, so I've just put in the Bears because they're cheap. And not too much analysis required for the defense there, especially not season long. So yeah, I think that's it. I've really only had to make that change from Taylor to Kamara. That was really it. So yeah, I don't think there's much more to say about that.
Yeah, no, I like it, Mark. Gronkowski was one that I'd looked at and considered at tight end as well. I just his floor games. I don't. He does. We've said it before. He is basically a wide receiver, isn't he, in that offense? But some of the floor games that he has,
yeah,
and I know all tight ends are capable of that, but I think it's just the weapons that surround him in that offense. In terms of the transfers, Kamara can't complain at that. I don't know about the Saints at the moment. I don't know.
Yeah,
but no, the team on the whole. I mean, the receiving core's out of this world. That in terms of if you're owning 4 receivers, I know Mike Evans we spoke about before can be patchy, but when he's on form, you could be looking minimum 100 points from your receivers alone there. Which, when you then look at the fact that you've got Josh Allen at quarterback, Gibson and Kamara at running back, this team has the potential to score massive points.
Yeah, Evans, I think he might be coming out next week if he puts up another low scorer because he's just not been consistent enough, and we'd be down to 4 weeks left by then. So I may well switch to a receiver as more got very matchup sort of friendly end of schedule, end of season schedule, something like that. Because I still need to catch up a little bit on this, not as much as your team, but I still need to do some catching up. So so we will see. So that's our season long stuff. I just thought it'd be nice if we had just a quick 5-minute chat about tonight's Thursday night showdown game.
Yes.
Maybe do you want me to share? Shall I share my screen on that one as well?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's go on. Let's stop that one and we'll share that. See, we've got a tab open for this. Here you go. Vikings against the Steelers. We've just been having various chats in various groups and stuff about quite a few things here to do with tonight's game. I think probably the biggest question everyone's lips is what to do about Cook and Mattison, because as we sit here now recording this, it looks like Cook is actually miraculously going to play tonight.
Yeah, he's still listed as questionable, isn't he? But everything I'm seeing seems to suggest that he will be.
Yeah. So it's a case of can you play? So I think there is an odd way to play Cook and Mattison together. Not everybody agrees with me. And the reason I'd want to do that is because the actual the matchup against Pittsburgh run defense, especially if you look at these sort of fantasy points over the last 5 weeks, is absolutely fantastic. It's like the 4th best matchup. And so if Dalvin Cook was fit and healthy, he'd be your number 1 player with the captain on him. I think 100% in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you knew that he was suiting up even at maybe 80%, I think you'd definitely stick the captain patch on him, shall we say? Is there a case to play both Cook and Mattison? Is there the funds available to do that, Mark? Do you think?
You can definitely make a lineup. You obviously need to play a cheap player, like like possibly a Washington, a McLeod, or you go crazy and play like a Ham or someone like that, or even a Zach Gentry, But it is definitely viable. It's definitely viable. The other side thing about this is, I think there's no Adam Thielen tonight, which means that would make you think that Jefferson is sort of nailed on for a smash game, doesn't it?
Yeah, you would think that. You would think that, but I also think KJ Osborne becomes a sneaky pick at 10.8 million as well there. And I think it probably helps Tyler Conklin as well. So if I was putting a lineup together, they would probably be two that I'd also be targeting, given that Thielen is out. And they are on the cheaper side. I think you can build, if you did want to go the double running back route and go with Cook and Mattison, I think you can build a decent line if you've got Osborne and you've got Conklin in. And then if you're willing to, like you say, include someone like a James Washington, for example. On the flip side, Mark, you could... I mean, it all depends on that status of Cook, but if Cook isn't good to go, then you can drop down slightly and pick Mattison, and Najee Harris is actually cheaper than them both as well. And the Steelers are a good team to run on statistically, but the Vikings you can run on as well, and they have given up quite a few touchdowns in recent weeks to receiving running backs, which Najee Harris also is. So I think there's a case there as well to actually play both running backs in this game from each team. It's a flip of the coin on whether you decide to go Mattison or whether you decide to go Cook. This is one of those where you're probably going to have to wait till closer to the game to get any real gauge or understanding on the status of Cook and whether he's good to go at 100%, whether he's on a snap count. We don't know.
Yeah. And Deonte Johnson is another one who's got a really good matchup in his in here today. I mean, if Cook wasn't in, then I think it's relatively easy to make your lineups based around Mattison, Johnson, and then you can use, like you say, some cheaper pieces like Osborne, Conklin, whatever, and rotate, Harris's, etc. I don't have massive interest in either of the quarterbacks in this matchup personally, because I think it takes away from some of the other skill positions, and definitely the ceiling on Roethlisberger isn't very high. Kirk Cousins is better. If I choose one quarterback, it would be Kirk Cousins because he's had a great season.
Do you think with the quarterbacks, Mark, that given the doubt over the running backs, that there's a case to be made to actually just build a Kirk Cousins, Jefferson, Osborne, Conklin kind of lineup with maybe throwing in a Najee Harris in there as well? I mean, it doesn't allow you to play Deontay Johnson building a lineup like that, so you'd have to throw in a cheaper piece from Pittsburgh's receiving core, I would say. Again, a James Washington maybe, but I think given that the stats say that you can run on Pittsburgh, do you think a lot of people are likely to play one of Cook or Mattison? Could you get a leg up on people if you are more than willing to put those funds into Kirk Cousins instead and rely on Kirk Cousins and his receivers? Because like
it's a great leverage play.
We're expecting a big game, aren't we, from Jefferson? And they're quite a balanced offense, I think it's fair to say, Minnesota, because they do run the ball a lot, but Kirk Cousins also throws a lot. So they are quite a balanced offense. I think like they're one of the few teams where I think there's a case week on week to actually play. If you were doing a stack, you could actually have a Cook, Cousins, and Jefferson or Thielen stack if you wanted to, and I think you could go into a red zone contest, for example, and not think, oh well, if Cook's having a good game, Jefferson or Thielen aren't going to have a good game. That offense is really balanced. The points are quite spread week on week.
Yeah, and that's another reason potentially to do what you're saying, because Cook and Mattison, if they both play and say Cook isn't 100%, they don't give him his usual workload, they could basically vulture points from each other. And that means, whereas on, say, the Pittsburgh side, the points could be more focused around Deontay Johnson or Najee Harris, or, one of our favourites, Freiermuth. So, I feel I need to play more than one lineup in this tonight. That's kind of what I'm getting from this.
Yeah, I think it's, for me, it could be one of those play more than one lineup, but maybe play a fairly similar lineup and just rotate the captain around just to try and cover your bases. I think that's probably the way I would approach this tonight.
But I think all things are possible. I think you can build a two. If you want to build a Cook and Mattison lineup, you really can do. It's a hard game to call because Pittsburgh are, they don't really get many plaudits yet. They still, their record's okay. They're still in the playoff hunt as far as I'm aware. And and Minnesota seems to find a way to lose games, which they should win. So tricky game to call.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, so before we move on to the main course of building our Week 14 lineup, Nick, I think you want to tell us something.
It is that time in the show, obviously, Mark. Manscaperoonie makes its return. So, as people are aware who listen to our show on a weekly basis, the support for the 5 Yard Rush Daily Fantasy Sport podcast is brought to you by Manscaped. Every single week, Mark, the best in men's below the waist grooming.
You don't have to tell me.
Yeah.
I've heard it 14 times.
Manscaped offers precision engineered tools for those all-important family jewels. Manscaped, they have recently launched their 4th generation trimmer, the Lawnmower 4.0, all across Europe. We've spoken in great detail about this before, Mark. All the good features that the Lawnmower 4.0 has. If you want to check them out, I would say get over to Manscaped. There is actually a pretty good TV advert that demonstrates as well without showing you, obviously, the too much. But yeah, get yourself over to Manscaped. Check it out. It is an area of the body you should not be neglecting. So join over 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped. We have an exclusive offer for you. You can get 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code 5yard at the checkout, and that is at manscaped.com. So when you get to the checkout, put in the code 5yard, and that will grant you 20% off and free worldwide shipping. Fantastic product. Don't miss out on the offer. It's a good chance to get a good chunk of money off it as well. And there is some really good packages over at Manscaped as well. The undies that you get in the little box set are nice and comfortable. So get yourself over there. Like I said, plenty of products out there that are offered by Manscaped, but are fantastic.
I know what to get you in the Secret Santa this year.
Let's get me some Manscaped undies. They're nice. I like them.
We should be getting them for free, I should think, by now.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's
I don't know about fantasy fatigue, Mark. I think I'm getting Manscaped fatigue week on week.
Below the waist grooming fatigue.
Yeah.
Okay, shall we? Let's try and build our lineup for this week, shall we? So here I am. I'm in it's the €7,500 red zone contest, and we've got 135 million to spend on our 9 players. As ever, we're going to start at quarterback. Patrick Mahomes is the most expensive, which I'm assuming is for matchup reasons, because it can't be because of recent performances. Then you've got Josh Allen in that big game against Tampa Bay. Justin Herbert, who was actually he's on an absolute tear at the moment. Then Tom Brady and Lamar Jackson. So, who do you want to talk about first?
I mean, there's some Do you know what, Mark? I don't actually like this list this week because I feel like there's some that are too obvious, and there's a few that are in difficult matchups, like Tom Brady and Josh Allen, both in difficult matchups. They're against each other. Mahomes, you would say, is in a favourable matchup against the Raiders, but he's just not played that well in recent weeks. He's picked up a little bit, but he just doesn't look like the MVP Patrick Mahomes that we're used to seeing. Kansas don't look that great anyway, I don't think.
Look at that last 6 weeks. He's had that 36-pointer, and then it's 14 points. It's the second highest in the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, he just seems off to me, Mahomes. I don't know. He's even just his throwing motion seems off. He doesn't seem like he's slinging the ball the same way he has in previous years. I don't know. I could be overthinking it, and he is still one of the top scoring quarterbacks. But if I was spending that much, I'd probably be looking at Justin Herbert, like you said, who has been on a tear recently. I actually like some of the cheaper options this week. Starting a little bit lower down the list with, I say a little bit lower, he's still, sort of top 10 on there, but Russell Wilson against the Texans, though the Texans have been pretty good against quarterbacks in recent weeks. I think we said the other week that it gets to a point in the season where the stats almost go out the window a little bit, and you've just got to take the matchup at face value. And Russell Wilson and the Seahawks coming off a big win against the San Francisco 49ers. So you would say they're out of the wildcard mix, but they are actually statistically still in it. They're only a few games back. So every game's must win for them here on out. So I like Wilson there. But the one that did catch my eye, Mark, and it feels like another trap, but Cam Newton is the one that caught my eye against the Falcons. This is one where I can't ignore the stats behind it. Falcons D, second worst this season against quarterbacks. McCaffrey out as well, I think, means that there'll be a bit more responsibility that will fall on Cam's shoulders this week to dictate the game, and I think it'll benefit him certainly when they get into sort of goal line positions. And there's a nice stack to be had, I think, there as well with DJ Moore's reasonably priced. Obviously, we'll come to him when we go through the receivers, but there's for me the quarterbacks this week, a lot that I don't really like. Like Ryan Tannehill in weeks gone by, I would have said, I like Ryan Tannehill there at his price, but the Titans were struggling, weren't they, before the bye? So
they got so many injuries.
That's it. And Julio Jones is back this week. That, if I was looking at them, that's one of the things that did catch my eye. But
He'll play the first quarter anyway.
Yeah, well, that's it. Coming off IR anyway. But yeah, the obvious picks I had down were Justin Herbert. I did put Dak on my list, but I don't even think Dak's an obvious pick against Washington's defense this week. I like Russ, I like Tannehill, but Cam Newton was the one that, at his price, I think if you're gonna punt at someone this week to try and be a bit different and not just own Justin Herbert or Patrick Mahomes, Cam Newton's pretty cheap.
The matchup against Atlanta is fantastic. It really is. If I was paying down, though, and this might get me kicked off this show till the end of the season, I would probably play Taysom Hill. Which the reason being, not because I'm not viewing him as a quarterback there. I'm viewing him as a running back. And the Jets are pretty much the best matchup for running backs this week. If you look at the last 5 weeks, I mean, I'm using stats all based on from the last 5 weeks, and they are the best matchup for running backs.
Yeah.
So if you consider him like that, I would say he'd be who I'd be paying down for. If I was paying up, though, I still like both Brady and Josh Allen. I just think that game's going to be like a 35-31 sort of a game. And I think those two will be the reason. I know they've both got strong defenses, both those teams, in different ways. But we're just at that time of the season where the best offenses, and the playoff caliber offenses just do well and they just score. And I think this is going to be one of those games. I can't wait to see it as a game, to be perfectly honest. So if I was paying up, I'd happily be there. But I know what you mean. It's not. I feel like other weeks we've been almost spoiled, whereas this week I don't feel like that at all.
It feels like with the matchups, feel like there is a couple of obvious picks who will likely be highly owned. There are some picks who will likely still score well regardless of the matchup, but there's that risk that they won't because of the matchup. And then there is some picks that are a bit cheaper, but you don't necessarily feel that confident playing them. And this feels like one of them weeks at quarterback. It's probably one of the positions this week that I like the least.
And so there is a case to be made for spending down if you don't really like the position. So we've got to pick one. I'm struggling here because I wish we could both agree on one in the middle somewhere.
Yeah.
Because I don't really want to pick Cam Newton on there. I almost don't want to go on record.
Yeah.
With it being recording. But, for me, I think it's Cam or Taysom Hill if we're going cheap.
Well, I would never let you live it down if we picked Taysom Hill on this podcast. In fact, I will not allow Taysom Hill to be picked on this podcast. So insert Cam Newton into that lineup, please, Mark. Thank you very much.
Fine. I'm going to win. I'm going to win with the Taysom Hill lineup. In fact, all my lineups are going to be Taysom Hill lineups for this week now.
If Taysom Hill, if we finish this podcast with Taysom Hill in that quarterback one position, we would never hear the end of it. I would never hear the end of it because I don't like Taysom Hill. But you know that Jack would come knocking. Jack, who has guested on the show several times, he's in exactly the same boat as me. He does not like Taysom Hill. So
neither do I.
But Mark, you've suggested him. I feel like there's a little bit of love there. But
no, just fantasy, just head over heart. Anyway, let's move over to the. If we need to find another 0.4 million, we know where we can go. I want to spend up a defense this week, obviously. If looking at the running backs, the prices are a bit more compressed than they have been recently. We've got Austin Eckler, Joe Mixon, who's I think he's definitely going to play Joe Mixon, but he's injured as well. Fournette and Kamara's coming back in what's a favourable matchup, and it also looks like Mark Ingram isn't going to be available. And then you got Gibson, who's been on a real tear recently, completely taken over that offense the last few weeks. So I think there's some good options here.
Yeah, I think there is as well. Gibson is a player I've brought in a couple of my season longs actually this week. Again, some obvious picks. If Joe Mixon is fit and healthy to go, then the Niners, again, in recent weeks, teams have been able to run on them. Fournette, we mentioned about Fournette, Mark. Bills' defense, I think, is lauded to be this really good, really strong defense, and it can be. But in the past 5 weeks, they've allowed 6 touchdowns and over 600 yards to running backs, and that is just ground yards. That's not including any yards through the air to the position as well. You made a good point with Fournette. His usage at the moment is crazy. In the last 4 weeks, he's had 31 targets in that time. I think he's the second most targeted running back, but the highest in terms of receptions. So he's really efficient with his targets as well. And I think he's had around 420 yards for the season. So I just really like Fournette's usage at the moment. He seems to... We've always said with Brady that he's never really had a running back, and Fournette played well towards the end of last season. Started this season quiet, but he's come on really strongly in the last few weeks. I like that pick there at 18.9, even coming up against Buffalo. I think he's a good pick this week. But there is a name a little bit further down the list that I like as well. I think if Melvin Gordon isn't a go, I think Javonta Williams at 15.7 feels like a good price as well this week, because the only thing that stops him actually getting into a bell cow type role is when Melvin Gordon is fit and healthy. Last week he had the opportunity to see more snaps, more carries, and look what he does. So I think he'll, even if when Melvin Gordon comes back, to be honest, I think Javonta Williams, this is his position now for me. He is clearly at this stage the better running back. And I think at 15.7, especially if Gordon's not good to go, I think he's a good price. If Gordon is good to go, I'd probably think twice about it at that price. But I think they're pricing him at that because they're expecting that he won't be. I think if Gordon was healthy, he'd probably maybe 2 million less on that price tag.
Yeah, I think how many times have we said, we watch it and we're like, yeah, they should be playing that player and they don't. And that's the danger, is that as well as he's done, Williams, I think that if Gordon comes back, he's still going to be just slightly more injury permitting, obviously, slightly more workload than Williams, but Williams is going to be more efficient.
Yeah,
I think down here though, if you want to pick a player around the same price, I think Josh Jacobs is kind of I think he's an obvious play this week
against the Chiefs.
Yeah, and his use in the passing game was
seems to have stepped up. Yeah. And he's not known as a pass catching running back, is he? But it has stepped up. And
there's no real competition for him in that backfield. And at that price, I just think he's for me, he's my first. No, he's my second running back on my list. Jacobs. My first is Alvin Kamara this week. I just think the matchup is so good. No Mark Ingram. I know there's always this sort of narrative that because Taysom Hill's playing, Kamara won't get any points. But I think the Jets are so bad against the run, they can both score points on the ground. I don't think that's an issue. I like Kamara. I like Fournette. To be honest, if Mixon's fit, I like him as well. Eckler could also. The other thing I forgot to mention to you, when you say like Justin Herbert for Chargers, of course they could be without their top two receivers this weekend, and I think that possibly means that Eckler will get more of the workload.
Yeah.
And also, as he's the most expensive, as tends to happen, they tend to slightly suppress their ownership.
Yes. Yeah, we have seen that in weeks gone by. I think if you're paying down at quarterback, he's someone you can definitely include in there. And I think if the situation remains the same, like you said, with Keenan Allen out, Mike Williams out, he'd definitely be someone who would be in my thoughts as a starter. One thing, just going back to Josh Jacobs, Mark, one thing I really like about Jacobs is you see on some teams that you can have a lead back and then they get to the goal line and the lead back disappears. And we saw it with Taylor last season. He'd get to the goal line and all of a sudden Naeem Hines is coming into the game as a goal line back, and you're like, what is going on? Less so this season with Josh Taylor, Jonathan Taylor even just seems to be running through everyone. But what I like about Jacobs is when they get to the goal line, it's Josh Jacobs that's on the goal line waiting for the ball, and it always seems that is the play that they're going to go with. They just pound Josh Jacobs in. That's what I really like. When they get to that position, they don't overthink it. They just hand the ball off to Josh Jacobs and let him do the work, because he's good for, if you're in that sort of position where you're 2-3 yards out, he's good for 2-3 yards of carry. So, he's going to get in there. I do like Josh Jacobs.
I think we'll put him in.
I think his price and how he's performed
I think it's
recently.
a really good price. I really do. I mean, you can make a case for a lot of these players, to be perfectly honest. Up here,
this
in
could
the middle,
very much be it could be a 3 running back week again, Mark. It
definitely
could be one of those weeks.
Definitely could be. Let's have a look at further down. Devonta Freeman seems to have taken over the sort of RB1 role there in Baltimore, which
Yeah,
I find interesting.
I still wouldn't pay up 13.1 million for a running back in Baltimore that's not named Lamar Jackson. Even though he does seem to have taken over the carries there. I mean, Cleveland's a tough matchup, I think, for them as well. They've not been great recently, Baltimore.
And
Lamar Jackson,
they got
Lamar
so many
Jackson
injuries.
and Lamar Jackson doesn't look the same Lamar Jackson that he looked 4 or 5 weeks ago. He's had a bit of a dip as well. So, yeah, I don't know with Freeman. I just don't like any running back really in that offense. That's one of them teams that I see them and I just think, oh, that's cheap, but avoid. Yeah, no confidence there at all.
So there's lots of injury-related players here on the second page. Gordon, Ingram looks like he's going to be out. Hubbard could be back to a RB1 role in Carolina, possibly. What player? The Houston Texans have got a really good matchup against the Seahawks. Seahawks are not great against running backs, fantasy point scoring wise on the ground. You got any interest in anybody like a Rex Burkhead?
Not Rex Burkhead, no. Not Rex Burkhead at all, no.
David Johnson. I don't know. They got the matchup is so good. I feel like one of them is going to score. Hit their value easily.
Yeah, I've been burned too many times by David Johnson to even speak his name.
Well, we don't have. You don't actually on this slate. You don't have to go that far down.
No, I don't think you do. I mean, on the second page, you've got Kareem Hunt at 12.8 at the top of that list. There, we know that he's basically a receiver on that team, isn't he? Because he doesn't take a lion's share of the carries out of the backfield. He certainly has, 5-10 carries a game. Maybe he's had some goal line snaps as well in the past, and because they are light at receiver, he comes in and takes some of that workload as well. So I think he's like a better McKissick. Not to talk down McKissick, Mark, because I'm sure you love him. He's down there at 10.7, but that's how Kareem Hunt, he feels to me like a bit of a McKissick in that offense. He'll still score your points. You might not get a consistently good week in, week out of him, but when he does score points, he does return his value. So he'd probably be one of the only ones I would consider in that match against Baltimore. There's not a lot that I like on this second page. But like you said, we don't actually need to go this far down, I don't think, this week.
We don't. And we've got 2 running backs in the team, so we may well come back and pick a third. But I think we can talk about wide receiver now.
Yeah.
Tyree Kill, $2 million more expensive than Keenan Allen, who I think is going to be out.
Yeah, it's looking that way. But I read something earlier that he was vaccinated, I think. So if he returns a negative test, I think he can play. So his status is actually still up in the air, as is Mike Williams. But that's one to keep an eye on because I love both of them, to be honest, this week, especially if you're going to play Herbert at quarterback. I think Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, there's a case to have both of them in there if you're going to stack 2 against the Giants. But if I was going for one of the 2, I do like that Mike Williams is over $3 million cheaper, but I do prefer the share of targets that Keenan Allen's received in recent weeks.
He's been so consistent, Keenan Allen.
He is every season.
He started off pretty slow, didn't he, at the beginning of this year, because Mike Williams was getting everything.
Yeah.
But it's he's just gone back to his usual role.
Yeah. He flies under the radar, Keenan Allen. He's like Mr. Consistent. Never a massive amount of touchdowns, but always gets the volume in terms of targets and receptions. Great pair of hands. One of the purest receivers I think you'll see in the league in terms of his route running and stuff like that. So, yeah, I like both of those Chargers receivers this week.
Yeah.
If they're healthy.
If they're healthy, yeah. So, what about Tyree Kill being the most expensive against Raiders? His actual figures aren't as bad when you look at them, as you possibly are led to believe.
Yeah.
I think he suffers by the fact we expect so much. We expect him to get those 50-point weeks every single week. It's actually not that bad. I mean, there's definitely boom or bust. There's like there's in the last 5, there's nothing between 7 and 20.
Yeah.
So he's sort of reflecting the general malaise that the Kansas City offense is showing anyway.
Just do me a favour, Matt, whilst you're on, if you flick across the tight end and look at Travis Kelsey and how he has performed. So he doesn't have the ceiling games that Hill has, and he still has the odd games where he seems to have had a dip, seem to be the same games where Hill had a dip. Obviously, games where Mahomes was struggling, but I think you get more consistent scoring out of Kelsey than you do with Hill, but you get bigger boom or bust with Hill.
Yeah, so that make Hill more of a tournament play.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we actually want to pay that 20 million for this week. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
so it's a very middling matchup. It's a middling matchup for wide receiver against the Raiders, based on the last 5 weeks. I think I personally, if we're going to pay up towards the top there, I just like Stephon Diggs this week.
Yeah. Who again in recent weeks has looked more like Diggs. You can ignore that 9.1 because that was in basically the middle of a blizzard. But all the games before that, against the Saints, the Colts, the Jets. I know the Jets are a bad defense, but he's not had a bad game really since that Tennessee game. He's had a couple of steady games, and he's had some very good games since then. So yeah, I like Diggs.
I do as well. I think we'll put him in. Do we need to put, by the way, DJ Moore in here to go with?
Yeah, I was going to come on to DJ Moore, Matt. Yeah. I think if you're going to pay down at quarterback and you're going to have someone like a Cam Newton in, and to be honest, I think there's a case to actually start DJ Moore, even if you've not got Cam Newton in. I've only included him in my list of players I like because it's a good stack with Cam. But just the matchup alone, Falcons have given up the second most yards and the joint most touchdowns to wide receivers in the last 5 weeks. So he is Cam Newton's favourite target on that offense. I think there is definitely a case to include him at 14.5. If you're going to start a Cam, you almost have to include him by default. If you're not starting Cam, I still think he's cheap at 14.5.
Yeah, I think he is cheap. I think he's if you think about it, he's the wide receiver one there, and you've got people like Metcalf and Lockett, and also you've got who else is there? 2 Chargers as well ahead of them. So yeah, I think so. The other guy I like who's cheap and seems a little bit too cheap to me is T. Higgins. I'm back on the T. Higgins
train. We're back at T. Higgins. It took you a few weeks, but we're back.
Yeah, well, there was that stat about how he scored. He's the top scoring wide receiver in fantasy for the last 2 weeks, and he's got another decent matchup against the Niners as well. And he's only 13.9. Feels to me like he's a sort of an obvious cheap play.
I won't argue with that, Mark. So if you want to insert him in as our third receiver.
Yeah, great. So we, down here, just also on the second page, if Allen and or Mike Williams don't end up playing, then you've got to start looking at some of the cheap Chargers receivers, I think.
Yeah. Do you think there's a case this week as well, Mark, for Julio Jones, given he's coming back and there's not much there in Tennessee outside of him? I know he was on that page then, which has just brought me to him, but
he's 12.2. I see why you'd want to do it, but I just think you're chasing his past years. Personally, I just don't see him doing it again.
He's not done it much this season when he has been healthy, has he?
Exactly. That one week game. 2.
Yeah.
And that's 18 points still, which I know is good for that price, but I don't know. Just also, he's just coming back from injury. You could just you see so many paths to him re-injuring himself, for example.
Yeah.
Another guy down here I've got a little bit of interest for if I save some money is Russell Gage as well. His last 2 weeks, 11 receptions there, and then 6 receptions there and a TD. Would be a nice, not a nice run back, but if you're going to have a run back, you don't need to have one, but if you are, he could be a decent option against Carolina. The Carolina are pretty good, been pretty good against receivers, but I think we're looking for at that sort of price. The volume, I think, sort of puts him in consideration.
Yeah, correlates as well with some of the other picks that we've picked.
But I don't think we want to put him in right now because we might.
No.
So anybody else you like on this second page at all?
I was looking at some of the names as you were scrolling down then, and the fact that Amon-Ra St. Brown is on this second page at 10.6, just Marvin Jones, they just, I wasn't going to say to actually start the mark despite that 24.8 there. What I was going to say is that looking at some of these names on this second page really puts me off anything below what we're seeing at the top of this page.
Yeah, agree.
Because I don't think you need to go as low as this if you're paying down at other positions.
No, and also we think in DJ Moore and T. Higgins, you've got two such great value plays there, a receiver. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to tight end, where we've got Travis Kelsey back on the slate, George Kittle coming off his big game, Darren Waller, and then Rob Gronkowski. Darren Waller is interesting to me, though, at that price. Yeah, because he's been so inconsistent.
That's unlike you, Mark, to recommend Darren Waller.
No, I'm not recommending him. I'm doing the opposite.
Oh, right. You're saying...
No, I'm saying, yeah. I'm interested in the fact that I don't know why he's priced above Gronk.
Right, I see what you're saying.
Sorry.
Yeah, I thought you'd completely done a U-turn then, and you were on the Darren Waller bus.
No, you'd see the signs.
Yeah, I think Gronk. It's a weird week. I think this one for some of the top tight ends. I think you could play Kelsey. If you're going to pay up, you could quite easily play Kelsey and not worry about that. You could quite easily pick Kittle and not worry about that. Gronkowski, I think he's had some really good weeks recently. But there is always the danger that there's going to be some weeks where he's only targeted 3 or 4 times and only hauls in 2 of those. There's actually a couple of the cheaper tight ends that I like this week, Mark, and for reasons that we've already mentioned. If Keenan Allen and Mike Williams aren't good to go, I think Jared Cook's a cheap play at 9.1. He doesn't tend to see a massive amount of volume, but again, I think that's because the volume mainly goes to Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. When you actually look at the targets between those two players, that's about 20 targets per week from what you're getting from Herbert. So that's probably eating into, I would say, 60% of his passing attempts. And then the rest are mainly going to the likes of Eckler. So I think Jared Cook tends to be, again, a bit boom or bust. He's touchdown dependent, but I think if the 2 leading receivers are out, then there's certainly a case that he could be a nice cheap play at tight end. And I actually like Evan Engram as well this week. On the flip side of that matchup, because I think in recent weeks he's had a slight uptrend in his targets. He's nice and cheap at 8.6, but the Chargers do concede a lot of touchdowns to tight ends as well. I think they've conceded the second most this season to tight ends. I think it's about 10 on the season now. So, and that does carry forward into the last 5 weeks as well. When you actually look at sort of that last month of games, they're no better defending against tight ends than they were the 5 weeks prior to that. So, yeah, I like that as a cheap play as well. Again, do we need to go cheap at tight end, Mark, or can we pay up and get one of the more expensive ones?
Let me just talk about one more cheap guy, Ricky Seals-Jones, with Logan Thomas going to IR.
Yes.
There's been RSJ had a 3-game stretch as the starting tight end for Washington, and during that stretch, he finished as the overall tight end 14, tight end 6, and tight end 10. I think there's going to be a few fireworks in this game, and 7.2 I think is another great option if you're looking to save some money. at tight end. But I don't think we need to necessarily. It must be that stretch there. The other guy I would say, just because of purely on matchup, and also he's like the second highest scorer this season so far at tight end, is Mark Andrews. He's another. Well, if you want to pay up, he's another great option, I think.
Yeah,
and
I agree with that.
I don't think he always. I think he's generally lower owned, Mark Andrews. I think he kind of gets lost, and I think he will get lost in this because he's kind of at the beginning of that no man's land. So do you want to pay up though now?
I mean we've got 36.4.
We're going to spend 5 or 6 on a. We're going to spend 6 or 7 or something on a defense.
Yeah, because I think there is some good value anyway. Just sort of 6 to 6.5 in the defense this week. So we could have a Mark Andrews and still gives us then around 15, 16 million to spread elsewhere once we've picked a defense, which I think is a good, nice, strong position to be in. So let's have a look at that.
Yeah, so one defense I like down here on the bottom of the first page is the Chargers, because they're going up to the Giants and they're very shaky quarterback position.
Yeah. There was three lower down that I liked, Mark. The Chargers were the first on my list. The second on my list, but a bit more expensive, was the Titans against the Jags. The Jags just look awful. Having watched 4 quarters of the Jags last week against the Rams, they're just an awful football team. The other one was the Jets. I actually had on my list this week, which they're not a high-scoring defense by any stretch, but they'll be one of the lowest owned defenses. And the Saints, I just don't like the Saints. I don't know what it. I think they've really, really gone off the boil. They're not the Saints of old. So, yeah, and they're in games, the Jets. They're like a weird team. They can be in games. They do concede a lot of points, though, at the same time. So they're probably cheap for a reason. I think the Chargers at 6.9 is further against the Giants. You can't complain against that. Even though you're paying more than you would for one of the cheaper defenses, I think you've got the potential to get more points from them. Definitely.
Yeah, I think if I'm playing multiple lineups, I might just stick the Chargers into all of them, just because I just.
I did something similar with one of my a defense I picked last week. I can't remember who it was, but they were that cheaply priced. I just thought, I'm not even going to think about this. I'm just going to put them in all my lineups because it's cheap enough.
Yeah, and it's such a hard position to predict and stuff. So, so we were left with one player, one position to fill. We've got 15.6 million to spend. These are all the affordable players in all positions. There's nobody really exciting me at the top here of this list. If Mike Williams was playing, it would probably be him.
That would be the first one that would probably jump out at me as a pick. Would be if he isn't COVID designated, then I'd absolutely slide him into the lineup. Do we put him in at this stage, Mark, in hope that he is going to play?
Yeah, because
what would be the pivot if he did?
Yeah, let's assume he's not playing at the moment. I'm just going further down. Yeah, it's strange. It's strange when you do this, isn't it? Once you've got rid of the players you really want and you look at it, it's quite hard to choose. Elijah Moore's been doing pretty well recently. Take away that one. Look at all those. It's pretty good. But playing a Jet does feel suboptimal.
Are the Cowboys the Cowboys at home or on the road?
I think it's at Washington, isn't it? Pretty sure it is.
I just saw Cooper on that second page, but he tends to only play when he's in Dallas. He's got a weird stat correlation, Amari Cooper, where if he's on the road, he just doesn't perform as well as he does when he's at home.
Actually, Dallas, McLaurin has a better matchup than the Dallas wide receivers. He's been very boom or bust, a bit more bust than boom recently.
Yeah, he has. He's Do you think he's due a big week though, Mark? 'Cause
Mm,
he's gone a few weeks now without that big week, and do you think that's a shootout game between Washington
yeah,
and Dallas?
I think two things. I think teams are focusing on him a lot more than they were because he's just been so consistently good, and I think also they're just Washington have become a run first team since the bye week. But there is a case to be made for him. Jamar Chase, if you want to use the phrase due, Jamar Chase is definitely due, but T Higgins is kind of
Good. I think
so,
that's it's a good matchup there as well. I
yeah.
think is against San Francisco because they've had some injuries to defensive backs, and Josh Norman seems to be getting burned week on week and doesn't look anything like the Josh Norman of old. So
yeah,
and then you've got Metcalf there as well. If the beastly DK Metcalf turns up, you'd be happy with him there. But I don't know why Wilson's not throwing.
Let's go all in. Let's go all in and put in Chase just so we can finish the show. Chase
because we could be here all night.
We could be here all night choosing this team.
But
so
I will say we've got him in, Matt. But if it turned out that Mike Williams was good to go, he would be my pick there at that 4th.
Yeah, 100%. I 100% agree. So at the moment we've got Cam Newton at quarterback, Leonard Fournette and Josh Jacobs at running back, Stephen Diggs, DJ Moore, T Higgins, Jamar Chase at wide receiver, Mark Andrews at tight end, and the Chargers DST. This feels like a very strong team to me this week.
It feels very strong, and it feels very balanced as well across the board. There's no, even at quarterback, because you're paying up 17.6 for that position, it still feels very balanced funds-wise across the board. It doesn't. There's no specific weakness, I don't think, throughout.
I will obviously swap out Newton for Taysom Hill, but we'll see how we get on.
If I find out you've done that,
you will find it out. I will screenshot it out to everybody. But I'm not going to be here anyway for the next 3 weeks, probably, because I'm going away. Fingers crossed, assuming they don't change the rules by Tuesday. So yeah, I'll be back for definite week 18, which is a giant cluster fudge of a week. So so Nick, yeah, if I can get on for the next 3 weeks, I will do from Italy. But otherwise, I'll be handing everybody over to your safe hands.
Yeah, so I suspect that there will be some guests on over the next few weeks because I'll be damned if I'm going to sit here for an hour chunnering away to myself. So yeah, I've no doubt we will have some guests on over the coming weeks, which is exciting. But you will be sorely missed, Mark. I do hope you have a good holiday, and I do hope that you manage to actually get away as well.
Yeah. Well, so if I can jump on, there's definitely a path to me being able to jump on every now and again, or at least abuse you through the comments, if not on the actual stream. So you can find me at _SMRF on Twitter. Final words to you, Nick?
Yeah, you find me at Nick of Wigan. Remember, guys, when you pick your lineup, catches are for show, touchdowns are for dough. See you next week.